Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is about the books that are read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. She's a founder and CEO of Evolve Ventures Technologies LLC, and of course, a fellow podcast host of the Evolve Ventures, none other than Ms. Emilia Smith.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Ms. Emilia on Book 101 Review. Can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yes. Thank you for having me. So my name is Emilia Smith, as you mentioned. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And I am someone who is very eager to be here and grateful to be here. And as the founder and CEO of Evolve Ventures and a fellow podcast host, I am so grateful to be here. I am someone who, as a conscious evolver, someone who, as a CEO, has developed over years and years, serial entrepreneur turned into a trauma certified coach and consultant, and now a multi-generational, multicultural consultant that works with people from all over the world, primarily making sure that while these times change, we as human beings are changing with the times. So a little bit about me and my story, if that's where we want to go. I think that might be helpful for a little context.
Definitely.
So,
Yes.
okay, sounds good. Great. So I got started podcasting only 6 years ago. We were just talking about that before we jumped in. And I actually started Evolve Ventures podcast actually 2 or 3 years after my initial podcast journey. So now as a multi-leadership, multicultural coach, someone who helps individuals and high performers evolve, now we have this big old organization called Evolve Ventures Technologies, where ultimately we help people transform by breaking their limiting beliefs, one limiting belief at a time. So when we got started podcasting, my partner, Bianca Thomas, and we got into this just excited and eager to help people transform, not knowing what we were getting into. But fast forward 5 years later, here we are with Evolve Ventures. And little did I know that it would take pretty much everything in me and give so much more. So when I was younger, I realized, looking back, that conversations about growth and development were somewhat normal in our household. My grandmother was a researcher. She learned that sound was something that, as people who evolve and learn about themselves, is absolutely necessary. So whether it was my exposure into her music as a child, learning and developing, and then subsequently going to therapy really young, I realized that there was a huge gap in both the personal development area, but also in the therapy area. So this one question kept coming up to me: why, as human beings, do we get stuck even when we want to grow or we want to do better? Why is it that for some reason or another, we have no idea how to get out of our own way? And so through my research, through the work that we've done at Evolve Ventures Podcast and Evolve Ventures Technologies, I've had the pleasure to work with now so many different people, so many organizations, couples, teams, leaders, you name it, to now understand and be able to help people transform what they want and say they want to actual behavioral change. So it's been quite a journey. There's so much more there. And I'm so excited to be able to add value to your listeners' lives and talk about books and how meaningful books, in addition to music, in addition to all the things that we go through as human beings, can really have a tremendous impact.
Definitely. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Miss Emilia, I pronounced your name correctly. I remember Emilia is the right to pronounce your name. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about being you. Being the CEO of Evolve Ventures Technologies. You coach leaders across cultures and generations. What is the most common leadership assumption that breaks when you move from one cultural context to another? Something that works in one setting but completely fails in another.
That's a great question. The first thing that pops off the page immediately is that
Yeah.
across cultures, we immediately, as leaders that are unseasoned, and I say we because I've been there before, so I know the mistakes personally and on a professional level, what might work as a leader in our culture and in our generation for positive influence and making positive change at scale with your team, with the people that are looking up to you to help lead them, is what is unique to your culture is not necessarily going to transfer. So something as small and as seemingly insignificant as humor, as facial expressions, as even jokes or assumptions. And I find that leaders across generations in particular, one of the biggest things that leaders get wrong and kind of pinch themselves later for is they make an assumption that other people whom they lead have the same set of experiences that they do. And that one singular assumption that other people experience the same thing as you do ends up falling face forward into kind of that pinch, like I said. And so leaders who really equip themselves with understanding emotional intelligence, how emotions kind of translates slightly across cultures, and those that don't, humor, stories, etc., and the different generations, those who brush up on not only their emotional intelligence skills but also the technical language specifically to their language, when they are able to do that and understand the biggest differences from a place of self-awareness, they're able to make the most meaningful change with their teams and in their organizations.
Meaningful change. We love that, Miss Amelia. You work with both baby boomer leaders and Gen Z emerging
Mm-hmm.
leaders. What is the core tension you see between those or these generations in the workplace? And what's actually possible when they stop judging each other and start understanding each other?
That's a great question. So, boomers and Gen Zers, and I just got off the phone with a client who's a Zennial. So, that's between the years 77 and 79. And so, it's a little micro in the Gen Xers. But the common tension that I see between the boomer generation and Gen X, it comes down to the pull up the bootstraps mentality. And what that essentially means in boomer generation is essentially don't talk about your personal life, leave personal life at the door, and just go to work and do your job. And that becomes the biggest rub for Gen Xers who are now having millennial children. They're in the workplace and they're wanting more out of their careers, specifically their leaders. And pulling up your bootstraps, for lack of better words, is not really the best way to approach leadership. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. Gen Xers have more levels of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, more self-awareness that's helpful in a workplace, whereas boomers really struggle to turn inwardly, leverage emotional intelligence levels, leverage self-awareness, and be able to use that in their language to where you recognize that it's work, leading, effective leadership is not actually about leaving personal life at the door. While that would be a great strategy, that's not what happens. How we work as human beings is very different. Where we work, especially given the last 6 years, has been totally upheavaled by COVID. And so whether it's a Gen Xer or a boomer, they are constantly having to learn how to retool from a standpoint of understanding how emotional intelligence, specifically pulling up the bootstraps, and here's where vulnerability comes in, how that actually leverages the key components of change when it comes to human beings, their psychology, and real behavioral change.
Well said, Miss Amalia. You have background in international business. What's leadership lesson you learned navigating cross-cultural environments that now sits at the center of how you coach?
Mm. I would say the biggest cross-cultural and international biggest lesson that now sits where I now coach from and consult from is the key core concept of humility and how humility is practiced in different cultures and what that looks like in practice and action and your words and how you show up and how you convey humility and respect through the every interaction that you come into. And so one of my core philosophies as a coach and consultant kind of stems from that core concept of humility. And why humility when it comes to international business? Well, as we all know, and what we're experiencing in real time is change is the only thing that is guaranteed. And so as a business, whether you conduct business across seas or cultures, or even just in a microcosm of your own microeconomics and industry, ultimately your level to be humble and to adapt to change is what is going to help you succeed as things change internationally or on your shores. And so that is at the root, and the belief that I hold as a coach, as a consultant, as someone who works with leaders is that that core component that you have everything within you already. And when you can come from a standpoint of that enoughness, common leaders' challenges stem from this belief about themselves that they are not enough. I believe that every leader is enough in their what's called intrinsic value. And from that place of humility, understanding that we need to retool always, because the tides of business, whether it be international or domestic, is always going to be shifting. And so being humble and being willing to be a prudent student, if you will, shows up in every single conversation that I have, because there's always something to learn, whether it be from a different generation or a different culture. So that's where it kind of sits at everything that I do and how I lead, even with my own team.
You talk about nervous system intelligence, phrase that are gaining traction but is still unfamiliar to many leaders. What does nervous system intelligence actually look like in a leadership context, and why does it matter more than traditional emotional intelligence in high-stake environments?
That's a great question. So, nervous system intelligence breaks down to critical components, but what I would say the most critical in practice and actual tactical application when it comes to leaders, most people are on autopilot. And leaders, to some degree, they know that. And what does autopilot actually mean? So, autopilot is just you're not actually listening to the question or what is going on in your team to actually respond from a thoughtful standpoint that is value centric, that is oriented in alignment with the core aspirations of your team, that's in alignment with the belief systems and the culture of your team, but rather you're just automatically reacting. And so nervous system intelligence takes in a critical component of self-awareness of the actual biology of how human beings work. And so the nervous system is one of those systems that human beings are constantly responding, or rather reacting. And the difference between respond and react, responding is taking a moment to consciously pause and answer that question from that team member, or have a meeting and be mindful of the agenda that you put on there, or in practical, tactical office settings or in-person settings, noticing where someone's breath is. And so that minuscule attunement, knowing not just from the cognitive standpoint, but knowing from a nervous system if someone is on autopilot or if someone is consciously choosing, is absolutely critical. And leaders in the 21st century, as they grow and evolve and learn that it's not just emotional intelligence, it's understanding that the nervous system has different branches and how that shows up in high pressure, to your question, situations, is that who is able to not only remain calm under pressure, but be able to make rapid decisions that have a high ROI for the business, the organization, whatever it is, and do so keeping the end in mind, meaning taking that long-term perspective and being able to do it in real time. And that is a skill that's practiced over time. Nervous system intelligence requires you to turn inwardly and understand your own nervous system. And believe it or not, we as human beings who are very much overwhelmed and just seek entertainment than active manicuring of our own nervous system, it's a lot easier to just externalize or look outwards to have someone tell you about yourself, but it actually takes practical, tactical skills in order for you to develop that nervous system intelligence as a leader.
Beautifully articulated. Miss Amelia, you mentioned building the world's most trusted ecosystem. Trust is the heavy word, especially when technology and mental health intersect. What does it take to earn and maintain the trust, and what are you doing differently to address the skepticism people have about tech in the
Mhm.
space?
This is a fabulous question, and I appreciate it so much because you're absolutely right. Trust is one of the biggest things that I know the skepticism is higher than it's ever been. When we talk about AI, which who isn't at this point, there's a huge concern when it comes to privacy and whatnot, especially when it comes to an ecosystem. And so the vision that I have in mind for the future that we're actively building to actually has safety in the core conversations that we have in absolutely everything we do. So, this is from the systems that we engage upon, the partnerships that we connect with, looking at not only the data privacy policies, but making sure that safety, that is what is preceding any trust that we quote unquote earn, if you will, because when safety is the focal point, trust becomes an eventuality. And what do I mean by that? Most human beings struggle to trust anyone, but what is at the heart of that? It's that the nervous system does not feel safe with that person. And so when you apply that on a global scale or when you apply that on a bigger organizational scale, it's just like classic branding, right? Do you have an ecosystem, a brand to where people are know and trust and ultimately on an unconscious level feel safe in their own bodies when they engage within you? And so whether it be our marketing campaigns, our website, literally engaging from this standpoint, my core focus is safety, knowing full well that every single being has a nervous system that while similar components of safety are at the center point, subjective safety is real. And so whether it be a different team or a different partnership, safety is the primary focus. And how we apply that is in our practical, tactical application of safety in real time. And so you'll never see something come out of Evolve that hasn't been run through the screen of how will this come off on someone's nervous system, especially given the fact that AI is now here. People are wanting to use it. They're hesitant. They remain skeptical to what you mentioned. Are you a real human? Do you have a real heart behind that? And when the stakes are high, are you willing to deliver upon that safety? No matter what? Are you willing to stand by your values no matter what? And that honestly easier said than done. And when the tough gets going, I run to those opportunities where we get to build safety and trust with not only our clients, our community, and the partnerships that we have as well.
Your ecosystems spans coaching, therapy, trauma informed systems, advanced technology, and scalable education. How do
Mhm.
these five elements work together in practice, and how do you ensure they don't become soiled offerings but an integrated whole?
It's a great question. Appreciate that so much. So, as you can even see on our website right now, we have a pop up that says live events. So, the integration of this ecosystem is not only just services, but community. Community as that, speaking of that safety, community is at the center point of everything that we do. So, picture a wheel, right? The ecosystem, just like our natural environment, has a reciprocal effect. And so everything that we do and don't do has a ripple effect. So in that spoke of the wheel at the very hub is is that safety. So these different offerings, whether it be the consulting, whether it be group coaching, whether it be live events, we even have movie club that is so much fun. All of these are integrated at a level to where one connects to the other. Private events, right? Private group chats, all of these different elements connect to each other so that there's a little bit of overlap. If you enjoy group coaching, you're likely going to enjoy some degree of movie club. If you love our live events, then you're likely going to love some of the offerings that we have. And ultimately, we try to make sure that every single spoke in this ecosystem has nurturance from an actual human being, not just an AI. And that is so critical in the time that we are in right now. because of the fact that while there's benefits when it comes to the technologies, there's also some huge drawbacks. And those drawbacks is that you're not getting personalized service and you're not getting personalized custom human beings behind all of the work that people are doing. And so at the heart of Evolve and everything that we do and don't do, which is just as important as what we do, there, there are human beings behind every single spoke. And that spoke within the ecosystem of Evolve.
Well done, Miss Amelia. You references Brené Brown concept of wholehearted living. How does wholeheartedness translate into leadership, and what does the leader risk when they show up only partially, protecting themselves from vulnerability?
So, wholehearted leadership is not only something that I deeply advocate for, but I believe, and when we look at the actual biology that is involved in what is wholehearted leadership, it actually shows. So I'm talking prime levels of cortisol, adrenaline, specific chemicals that are in our body that are leading to what we are seeing in unprecedented levels of burnouts within leaders. And so right now, whether you're a boomer, Gen X, or millennial, even stepping into that leadership role, wherever you are, ultimately, one of your biggest concerns as a high performer is leading, yes, but leading so that you can do so sustainably, because no one aspires to get to a leadership position or earns that right to be in a leadership position and then is like, okay, I'm done here. Right? Like that's not how it works. So you get to a leadership position, you earn that role, and then you have to figure out, oh my goodness, how do I keep the sustainability of this role and continue to evolve? And that's a lot. That can be a lot on the nervous system. So wholehearted living is not, like I said at the very beginning, leaving your life at the door. Wholehearted living is making sure that all circuits of the brain, body, and nervous system are online. And when they're online, you are doing so in a way that is in alignment with your core values, your core beliefs, and core aspirations, making sure that you're tracking your biometrics, but not overdoing it to where it gets too confusing and chaotic and scary. And ultimately, the tracking itself leads to burnout. So that the aspect of vulnerability comes into play, because let's be real, a lot of leaders are terrified of sharing who they are behind the scenes when no one's looking. And that's where it's scary to share your personal stories, to actually bring the whole heart. To be a daring and braving leader brings not just the logical brain, the rational, analytical number stuff, although that's incredibly important for driving towards those goals. What is critical is making sure that that heart is also on the table. The heart is also on the line. And when you have a leader that lives wholeheartedly, they're able to share personal stories when appropriate. They're able to express levels of vulnerability. And I see you, not becoming your therapist, but understanding where your struggle points are, because you are a team that communicates effectively where the struggles, the pain points are, not just sweeping them underneath the rug. That is what a wholehearted leader does, and does consistently, to make sure that they're not just leading from the front, they're not just leading from the back, but they're living wholeheartedly, and they're leading wholeheartedly from the front, from the back, from the center, in who they are and who they're bringing to the table sustainably every single day.
Well done, Miss Amelia. Beautifully articulated. And to wrap up our discussion for today, you work at the intersection of so many disciplines: psychology, business, trauma, technology. What's the biggest blind spot you discovered in yourself through this work, and how has it shaped your evolution as a leader?
The biggest blind spot that I consistently see, which is why I love talking about it and I so appreciate the ending question, is how shame shows up in our leadership, how shame shows up in our nervous system, and how the emotion and the experience of shame and how that seeps into our nervous system actually prevents us from having the change that we wish to see as leaders, to be able to keep up and remain sustainable. And so through those discoveries, one of my biggest advocates and one of the biggest things that I advocate for is actually self-compassion, because compassion is the only antidote that allows us as leaders to kind of rid ourselves not only of the shame that binds us, that prevents actual change from happening, but making sure that shame doesn't exist in the workplaces that we lead from. So I'm honored. I'm grateful to be here. And thank you so much for that last question.
You are most welcome, Miss Amelia. But before I will let you go, can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
You know what? Before this podcast, I made sure that I have my favorite lists pulled up just for us. So
Thank you.
I have a number of them. But as a leader, I think it's so easy to make sure that you go to the business tacticals, the practicals, and I think those are incredibly important. And honestly, a lot of individuals would go to that naturally. What most people, to that last element that I just said, most people won't go to is that trauma-informed written books and specific elements of where the neuroscience intersects with the psychology, intersects with our emotional experience as human beings. So ironically, I would highly recommend, if anyone wants to become a better leader, different generations, different cultures, I highly recommend these top 3 books. Number 1, Algorithms to Live By. This is by Brian Christian and Tom Griffiths. Super important for those analytical systems thinkers. But when it comes to the heart and understanding the nervous system, I would recommend number 2, What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce D. Perry. And the last one, for anyone that wants to change the narratives, change your thoughts, change your brain, change how you perform as a leader, would be What Happened to You. Choose Your Story, Change Your Life by Kendra Hall. I have them all on this list.
Yes. Thank you for that recommended books, Miss Amelia. And of course, I have one more last question. You're building something that did not exist before. Trusted ecosystem, that intersection of a mental performance, emotional safety, and nervous system intelligence. If you could look 10 years into the future and see the impact of what you're building fully realized, what would have changed in how leaders lead, how organizations operate, and how people experience work?
Great question. Okay, so the first change that I would see in how leaders lead, I would see a heck of a lot more leaders getting outside with their teams, getting outside in nature and making sure that nature is a critical component when it comes to the workplace. No longer in cubicles and inside all the time, because leaders at 10 years from now understand the negative implications on not only our nervous system, but our mental health and future generations epigenetically. So that's number 1. The second thing is I would see 10 years from now that they would integrate trauma-based systems at every section of their leadership. So safety and trust being a conversation that is not happening just in HR roles or in HR departments, but actually at the center point of every single team meeting. Third, the last thing that I would see from now is that while, yes, we have our devices, we also have a deep knowing that is unquestionable and undeniable about our work and when we work and how we work. And so 10 years from now, it is my goal, is my dream, my aspiration, and my mission to make sure that we all as human beings have the access to be able to have an ecosystem that allows us the privilege of living, not just of working. And I think that balance, when we can find not only purpose, but pleasure in that purpose, and we can right the scales that have been so totally offset in the last 20 years, heck, since the Industrial Revolution, one could say even before that, I think that we would all be living more in concert with the natural world around us. And that's what I plan to see, and that's what I plan to build.
Looking forward for those. And looking forward for more success, Miss Amelia. And can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your live event, or anything you want to promote on Book 101 Review?
I appreciate you so much. So I would love to, if you enjoy these conversations, join me on Evolve Ventures podcast. That is the place where we just crossed 500 episodes. So we talk all things mental health there. And from there, we have invitations to our live events. We have an Evolve journal that we will be publishing very soon. So I'm very excited for that, to have leaders ultimately integrate their growth behind the scenes when no one's looking, so that it translates in the front of the scenes when everyone's looking and when the stakes are really high. So those are the 2 things that I would encourage everyone to go check out. And live events, movie club, everything is there if you go to the podcast. Thank you.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Amalia, because if you support her, for sure, more and more live event, live ecosystem that will fulfill for our generations to come. So, Miss Amalia, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you so much.
Yes, Marticon people, see you soon.